if the ACTU were serious about improving workers' lives, they wouldn't be talking about some nonsensical headline-grabbing 4-day work week. Competitive unionism, so a choice in representation as well, so you're not forced to donate to the Labor Party. It's that 91% of teachers don't think that transgender ideology has any place in classrooms. And I know that the media likes to pit teachers and parents rather against each other. Teachers are on the same side as parents on this issue.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV Australia. I am your host, online editor Alexandra Marshall. Today, education is a big deal in Australia. We've seen some disturbing headlines in the press this week to do with transgender entering the school curriculum at 5 years old. We've also seen the unions getting up to some interesting stuff at the Productivity Roundtable, including a 4-day week. Joining me to discuss this and more is Edward Schuller, who is the National Secretary of the TPAA, which is the Teachers Professional Association of Australia. He's also a spokesperson for Red Union. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Alexandra. Appreciate it.
Look, this productivity roundtable hosted by the Treasurer is already putting out a whole stack of really bad ideas, and it hasn't even gotten started. One of these is from the ACTU, that is the Australian Council of Trade Unions. They want a 4-day work week. They want to keep the same pay but reduce the hours. They say it's going to increase productivity and it's sort of going to help lift living standards. Everybody else disagrees with them. What's your take on this?
Oh, my take is that the ACTU don't really care about workers, and I know that the business community are up in arms at this, and so they should be. You know, workers want arrangement that make their jobs more secure and bring greater purchasing power. They don't want proposals that just increase unit labour costs without actually increasing their incomes or ability to spend. But yeah, the ACTU don't care about workers. They're run by a couple of millionaires, Sally McManus and Michelle O'Neill. These are women who get paid over 10 times more than the average member of the ACTU does when you include their salary packaging and other board positions. So if the ACTU were serious about improving workers' lives, they wouldn't be talking about some nonsensical headline-grabbing 4-day work week. They'd be talking about things, actual measures that can be taken, which we at the Red Union are pretty clear on to properly propel, I suppose, purchasing power and increase job security.
Well, let's think about this seriously for a minute. Because bad ideas often make it to legislation when you've got the Labor Party and the Greens acting in a coalition. So how would this work? If you've got a 4-day work week for unions, but the rest of the country runs on a 5-day week, not just Australia, but the rest of the world. So Australia can't just say it's 4 days and then try and deal with America or Europe. It doesn't work. How does that interact with education, with the transport sector, with the hospital sector? How does this, and with also workers in the private industry, how is this going to work in a social and realistic economic sense?
Well, I think that's the whole point. It's not realistic. There's no real proposal about how this would work, how it would interface with school weeks as well. Obviously, in my role with the TPAA, there's hardly enough time in the week to get through the stuff that's in the curriculum at the moment nationally, which needs to be reformed. But this whole idea, I mean, like you said, there are so many different aspects of society that would be affected by this. And the ACTU know this. They're completely disingenuous when they talk about this 4-day work week. And like I said, if they were serious about reforms that propel purchasing power and increase job security, you'd be talking about non-compulsory super, instantly increasing 12.5% salary, competitive unionism, so a choice in representation as well, so you're not forced to donate to the Labor Party. And the third one is the big one, a complete and total shutdown of immigration into Australia until every worker can afford their own home.
Well, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, was asked directly about this point. I think it was yesterday. And he said, and I quote, "I'm up for big reform and we are a big reforming government. We have a big agenda." Frightening words to pretty much everyone in the business sector. But what I find really strange is we know it can't work. We know we can't have a 4-day week. So does this mean that the unions may be actually pushing for extra double time and a half rates, for instance, by treating that that extra day, that fifth day, as if it were a weekend? And if so, might that push private sectors and the taxpayers basically out of business? And how does that help union workers if their jobs start evaporating?
Well, this is the whole point. It does the opposite of increasing job security at all. It'll mean that there will be more cheap labor come in because employers still have work to be done. It doesn't mean that there's 20% less work that needs to be done because workers are working 20% less. And the main thing is workers don't want to work less. Like, sure, everyone wants to be paid more, everyone wants to work less, generally speaking. But in this economy, people want to, and it's an Australian value, you want to work hard to get ahead. And this is the complete antithesis of that. And again, it doesn't even stack up practically. It doesn't make any sense. They haven't spoken about how it's achievable. So, look, I guess the message to the Prime Minister, if he wants reform, I've just listed three things that he should look at reforming: non compulsory super, competitive unionism, and a shutdown of immigration until workers can afford their own homes.
Yeah, there are reforms available that don't crash the economy, just so the Prime Minister is aware of this. And also, don't set union workers against private industry workers. They don't have to be at odds if the union behaved sensibly rather than politically. To segue slightly into education, I wonder how this will work with Jacinta Allen, the Victorian Premier's pledge that they will have 2 working days from home. I'm guessing with a 4 day week. So I'm not sure how that works with the teachers in Victoria. Are kids supposed to be home for 3 days a week? I mean, what are your thoughts about all of these reforms coming in for particularly the education sector?
Education has worked the same as it has 20 years ago. We know what works in education: Zoom meetings and cognitive dissonance from students having to log in on a laptop and talk to a virtual teacher. It doesn't work. We know that that doesn't work. It doesn't work in their education, but it doesn't work with social development, and it doesn't work with the ability to interact with other people, which is obviously an important part of our schooling system as well. So again, there are so many reforms that can be made within the education system, but forcing teachers to teach online classes for a couple of days a week. I know uni's going down that path, and it's not like uni degrees are getting particularly more sought after. I know that the demand is high, but in terms of employers, I think a bit of real world experience is starting to come up trumps with that. So again, it's not thought through because it's not genuine. So I don't think the ACTU are actually serious about this 4 day work week. I think it's a distraction from those very clear things that are standing in the roadblock for higher wages for workers and also greater productivity for businesses. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but it just seems like reform can deliver both. But the reforms that the ACTU and the federal Labor government seem to push are ones that damage both.
Yes, there is an AI revolution damaging the education of young people in this country. AI cheating is sort of rising and rising and rising. And the only way to combat it is to force kids to sit their exams and learn in classrooms where they can't reference AI. So, what does the education union want to do? Send all the kids home so that nobody can work out if they're getting Alexa or whatever to answer their exam questions. It's a disaster. It's not going to help anyone. But let's talk more seriously about education. The TPAA put out a very interesting study about gender inside the education system. And by that, I mean transgender teaching or teaching children about gender dysphoria inside the classroom. What was this survey? What were the concerns or the comments that led to the creation of this survey?
Well, we initially did a survey because there's been a rise in reported sexual incidents at schools. When members made that clear to us, we put out a survey on that. And one of the things that came back unprompted was that the gender ideology was leading to a lot of that. So I think that's what prompted that survey, which found that 91% of teachers don't think that transgender ideology has any place in classrooms. And I know that the media likes to pit teachers and parents rather against each other. Teachers are on the same side as parents on this issue. They think that this transgender ideology is child abuse, and it's hard to see how it's not. And I think there's going to be a reckoning for people who push it, like, as you mentioned, Jacinta Allen. I mean, earlier this week, she stands up at a press conference, berates a journalist.
That's just nonsense. It's disgraceful nonsense. Like, seriously.
And then spits in the face of every normal person who questions that men are, men are really women and women are really men. Like this isn't just an issue about informed consent for children, as important as this is. It's about the truth, and it doesn't become any truer that a male can become a female when they turn 18. It's fundamentally untrue for all ages. This was what our teachers came very clearly back in. I think it was 85% of our teachers said, no, you can't change your biological sex.
Sort of ongoing attack on a program that is making a difference in kids' lives just should be stopped.
So, of course, this week out of Victoria, I mentioned before, we had this trending storyline about the Respectful Relationships course, which is coming under criticism from both parents and teachers. This is basically saying to kids who are 5 years old, they may have been born in the wrong body or have body parts that don't match how they feel about their gender. I mean, 5-year-olds aren't thinking about this, but this is what's being put forward in the schools. Now, Premier Jacinta Allen was quite frustrated when she was challenged on this topic by the press. And she said, and I quote, that it was put forward in response to the ongoing perpetration of violence against women and the ongoing rise of kids who are bullied. And she also said it was a making a transformative difference, which I think we can agree it's transforming the school curriculum. Not sure if we agree whether it's a good transformation or a bad transformation. She further said that to people who are criticizing it, it should be stopped. It's disgraceful reporting and it's hurtful. What happens to teachers who have 5-year-olds in their class and they don't want to teach them this kind of thing? Is there any way for teachers to say, hang on, no, that's not part of why I set up to become a teacher. That's not part of what I thought I'd be teaching. Do they have any protection or any ability to reject this?
Not a whole lot of protection, which is the really worrying thing. And the other worrying thing in Victoria in particular, teachers aren't allowed to talk to parents about the child's gender identity per se. They're not allowed to talk about any conversations that might have been had in the classroom. And you think about it, you're a parent sending your child to the school, and they're at school they're reporting elements of gender dysphoria, mental illness, and you're not able to get that information back from a teacher. So our teachers' hands are tied a lot of the time, and that's why we've put forward in our public schools log of claims in the upcoming enterprise bargaining protections for teachers who don't want to go along with this stuff, because there's got to be a stand taken, and teachers are taking stands. So many teachers have stood themselves down because of it. I know Moira Deeming, that's one of her big moves before going into Parliament, was the fact that she resigned because she refused to teach this sort of stuff. And we've got members that have chosen to do so as well, which is really, really sad. We've got a teacher shortage crisis. And our teachers have a lot of different issues to deal with in the workplace. And this is just one that is of the government's making. This is one that is of the union movement's making as well. And again, it's not benefiting anyone but themselves. And it is utterly cruel to children, which is the most horrendous part of this.
For those unfamiliar with the survey conducted, I'm just going to read through a few interesting statistics that were discovered. So here are the questions and here are the answers. Do you feel pressure to comply with employer guidelines on gender identity which go against your personal beliefs? 69.5% said yes. Do you believe transgender ideology should be taught in schools? 91.4% said no. Do you believe someone can legitimately become a member of the opposite sex? 83.9% said no. Do you believe that children should be able to take puberty-blocking drugs? 93.9% said no. As for surgery, 96.8% said no. And 83.9% think it's a bad idea for kids to be identifying as transgender when they are young children. If this is the case, why can't the teaching industry join with parents in pushing back? Is there anything actually stopping them, or is it just a fear of retaliation from the union they belong to? And if so, is there a solution to that?
Well, the solution is to firstly leave the union that is pushing all this. And I must say the Australian Education Union has spearheaded this in all of their state variants. For instance, in Queensland, the QTU. They are the ones that have been at the forefront of pushing transgenderism into the classrooms. They're the ones that walk around with the transgender pride flags on their shirts throughout schools. These are the people that have been the pioneers, I suppose, in corroding our children's mind on this. So they're not going to be the ones to stop it. They're the ones that are driving it. So it does take a lot of courage for teachers to leave that. But of course, the unions have bullying and coercive tactics to try and keep teachers and nurses as well in line, I suppose, on a lot of these social issues, which generally speaking don't have anything to do with the teaching profession. But I think this issue in particular, this is a moral issue. This is a moral issue. And anyone that doesn't stand up against what's happening, what's being put onto our children in the name of, respectful relationships, in the name of, inclusivity, all of this sort of stuff, it's cruelty. Adults are the ones that have to make hard, sometimes, uncomfortable decisions for children. But the idea that you're telling a 5-year-old that you're already confusing their gender and their sexuality at such a young age, I mean, it is perverse. And I really do hope, and I do think there is a reckoning coming when teachers and parents join together and rise up against this stuff.
Well, just one final quick question here. A lot of our audience are conservatives. They may not be labour unionists, but a lot of them will work in education. They'll work in the nursing industry. They'll work in various places where they are required to be part of a union. The Liberal Party was in charge of education for maybe a decade, both state and federally in most places. Nothing changed. The education department is still believed to be mostly under the control of labour unions. Is it foolish to wait for a change of government or to hope that a change in government will fix this? Is it more realistic that people changing unions are the ones who are going to be able to unchain these industries and start giving some pushback to this ideology? Because a lot of people won't have thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I guess look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. Like you said, the last 10 years federally, between 2013 and 2022, you had a conservative government in, and they let this stuff. They let the slow march through the institutions happen. And the evidence at the moment in terms of state governments, I mean, the only mainland LNP government is the LNP government in Queensland, and they've been in for nearly 12 months now. They've been supporters, at least the Deputy Premier Jared Blay has been a big supporter of competitive unionism in levelling the playing field in, workers, whether they're construction workers, nurses, teachers, being able to choose who represents them. There's not being this union monopoly where you're forced to basically pay thousands of your wages every year to a political party, effectively gets funneled up through there. So I guess the evidence isn't good, because the LNP has been in for a large enough amount of time to make some changes, make some reform. And I know that the Deputy Premier wants that reform to happen. But you've got health ministers like Tim Nichols, and you've got education ministers like John Paul Langbrook that are dragging their heels, that don't want to deal with another union, they say. But ultimately, it's workers that are losing out. So I think it's something that requires a bit of spine. And I know that the Deputy Premier does have that. He's shown very clearly his convictions on this issue. And I think it's a matter of time. The LNP in Queensland have got a good opportunity ahead of them to lead the way to competitive unionism across the country, which will mean workers' interests are actually served, and it'll mean the other unions will pull their heads into line on a lot of different things. And I think again, the gauntlet, I guess, is laid down to the state government in Queensland, to David Christofouli and Jared Blay. Make the law changes happen. Make the law changes happen, and workers will win.
Well, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us here today on Spectator TV.
Cheers.